I'm 63 years old. Never even heard of anybody dying of the flu, the regular flu. But 400,000 people I've heard of dying of this one, and I've heard of real people with real names that, people I know, that people know them, etc., who have died just this year. So I'm pretty sure the pandemic's real, people. The thing that you think about the most becomes your reality. Things that you don't think about are not your reality, even though they are your reality. They're not part of your subjective reality. You're not thinking about them. So the news is programming you. So anybody who is reading the news and thinks that fossil fuels will lead to greater hardship doesn't even know what the official Green New Deal friendly people are saying. They're not saying anything even remotely like that. They're saying things will be terrific in the future no matter what, but a little less terrific than they could have been economically. On the super bad news, we're up to 400,000 deaths from COVID. If you were one of the people who, early on in the pandemic, said, I think this is just the regular flu. Is there anybody out there who said, I think this is just the regular flu, or no worse than the regular flu? Have any of you changed your minds? Because I'm kind of curious about that. It used to be every time I went on social media, there would be, one of the biggest categories of topics were people debunking the pandemic because it's not real. But, okay, I'm answering the question I was going to get to. I answered it before I asked it. I was going to ask how many people could look at this now and still think that it's not a real pandemic. And I'm looking in the comments, and there's a tremendous number of you think that it's all still made up, that it's not real. All right. We're in a very bad place, people, when we can't tell if we're in a pandemic or not. I would say that's as bad as you could get in terms of the reliability of your information. Suppose you lived in a country where the news on both sides was actually attempting to be objective. What if both the left and the right told you, oh, it's a real pandemic, this one's real? Would you believe it? I don't know. We're at a point where nobody believes anything in the news anymore. It doesn't matter if your side says it or the other side says it. Somebody says there's no flu this year. Yeah. Now, it could be that there's no apparent flu this year because the social distancing is so good, and maybe the regular flu is not as aerosoled and spready as COVID is, so would that explain it? Or, my hypothesis, that the regular flu was never killing anybody anyway, and that they scare you to take the vaccinations, but you've never met anybody in your whole life who ever died from the regular flu. I'm 63 years old. Never even heard of anybody dying of the flu, the regular flu. But 400,000 people I've heard of dying of this one, and I've heard of real people with real names that, people I know, that people know them, etc., who have died just this year. So I'm pretty sure the pandemic's real, people. If you're still in the camp that this is all an artifact of bad data, I feel like 400,000 reported deaths would be about the time you should change your mind. I don't think you will, because that's not how cognitive dissonance works. And somebody says, old people die. All right, now let me take the counterpoint to that. There's an estimate out of the UK. I don't know how dependable this is, probably not terribly. But it says that half or two-thirds of the deaths in the UK are people who would have died that year anyway. They would have died that year anyway. Was that going to be a good year for them? Is the final year of your life, is that a good one? Well, that's subjective, of course. But if you're looking at how many people are dying from this, is it fair to say that the ones who are going to die that year anyway don't count as much as somebody dying when they're 15, for example? Now, that's one of those things you're not supposed to say out loud, but we all, intuitively think the 15-year-old, you don't want to say is worth more because that's not a place you want to go to, but you could certainly say they have more life left, they have more to contribute, blah, 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 blah. They may not be loved any more than the 81-year-old. All right, but I think it is fair to consider when you're looking at deaths that not all deaths are the same. And in a very real way, if we were making the decisions ourselves, let's say you had to make a decision for your family members, and somebody has to die, the teenager or the 90-year-old. Well, you'd pick the 90-year-old every time, right? So we're all on the same page there. So it's hard to get a number that makes sense for this, because 400,000 deaths. What if 300,000 of them were going to die anyway in a year? I wonder if a Biden administration will change the nature of what news gets promoted to the top of the pile, because those are individual choices. They're not just because of the news. Sometimes the news is so big that of course it's the headline, but most of the time the news is what the news people decide to talk about. They could be talking about, I'll just pick a topic, the fact that a lot of researchers think that microdosing LSD could be an end to mental illness problems, at least for some large number of people. That's a really big story. But it's nothing but a tweet and a minor story today, because the people who make the news have decided that's not a story. To me, if I were the one making the news and I got to decide what you talked about, that'd be right near the top of the list. Imagine that there's an existing chemical, widely available, basically close to free, it's so cheap to make, LSD, and that it might solve most of the mental health problems in this country. That's actually what's being talked about by people who are looking into it. That it's so powerful, it might be one of the most amazing miracle cures, actual cure, of some of the biggest problems in the country. Not even news. It's an article. That's it. Just an article. But if somebody dies in a police shooting that has some ambiguity, boom, it's a headline, it's a big thing. So always understand that the news is not because the news is necessarily the important stuff. It's the stuff that the people who bring you the news have decided they want to be front and center in your brain. So it's a programming decision, not of, you ever hear this word, programming? When they talk about TV schedules and what segments are in those schedules, they talk about that as programming. Well, you thought that they were programming their show, and in a sense they are. But they're actually programming your brain. Because what they put in the front of your brain, figuratively speaking, the front, the thing that you think about the most becomes your reality. Things that you don't think about are not your reality, even though they are your reality. They're not part of your subjective reality. You're not thinking about them. So the news is programming you directly and intentionally. It's not an accident when they say this will be your top story. They're saying, I'm going to put that in the top of your brains, and I'm going to make everybody in the country think about this. That's just programming. That's programming of your brain. It changes the actual physical structure, just like every experience does, of your brain. And they do that intentionally and daily, and in a way that affects billions. So I'm wondering if the number of controversial police shootings might be exactly the same, because I don't know that anything has really changed, right? We haven't come up with any great ideas for making questionable shootings go away. That hasn't happened. So if we see a great reduction in the apparent number of them, that would be another clue that your news industry is really a propaganda industry. So look for that. Unless there's something you can identify that's different about how the police forces are handling situations, which also might be the case. But if you hear that nothing big is different in terms of police work, but the number of weird shootings and controversial ones goes down, that's probably because the propaganda engine made a decision. Just keep an eye on that. Looks like Biden's going to shut the Keystone Project down. Here's the question I would ask, and you should look for this. Do you think you'll see any reporting on the left about the number of jobs that will be lost? I'll bet not. Do you think you'll see any reporting on the left about the impact of making a deal with your most trusted international trading partner and then just breaking it? Because we have a deal with Canada, and Canada spent a whole bunch of money to get ready for their end of the Keystone project, as I understand it. And now that they're all worked up and excited about it, we're going to yank it away from them? Even if you think we should yank it away from them for environmental reasons, that's a tough decision. If you want to be that country who can make a deal and then just cancel it on your closest trading partner, Canada, you got to really know that you want this to do that. I saw somebody comment on this and saying, yeah, it's bad in the short run with jobs and whatnot, but in the long run, it will save people hardships. To which I think the larger point was fossil fuels. If you reduce them, you'll save people hardships in the long run. To which I say, even the Green New Deal people don't say that. The most official UN-sanctioned prediction of what will happen if we don't reduce our fossil fuels is that our rate of growth will be a little less than spectacular. Our rate of growth will still be spectacular over the next 80 years, but it'll be a little less than it could have been. That's the official number. So anybody who is reading the news and thinks that fossil fuels will lead to greater hardship doesn't even know what the official Green New Deal friendly people are saying. They're not saying anything even remotely like that. They're saying things will be terrific in the future no matter what, but a little less terrific than they could have been economically. That's the official thing. And by the way, if you're hearing that and saying, what? I thought everybody said it's going to be the end of the world in 12 years. Nobody official said that. You know, you've heard it reported in the news, but there are no official bodies working on any of this full of experts who say anything like that. The only officials who are experts in the Green New Deal, even the ones who say it's the worst case scenario, are saying it's just, that's a little difference in 80 years. You'll hardly notice it. Actually, you wouldn't notice it. Not hardly notice it, you wouldn't notice it at all, based on the actual projections, the official ones. But we still need to take it seriously. My opinion on climate change, if you haven't heard it before, is that there's probably something real there that we do need to pay attention to, but I think we are. And we're paying enough attention to it that over 80 years we'll be fine. But we do need to pay attention to it.